The night my father threw me out, I wasn't holding a suitcase. I was holding the proof that I'd been human for the first time in my life. He looked at me like I'd dragged shame into his empire. His voice didn't tremble, not even when he said, "You're no longer a merchant." That was the moment something in me broke, not from his rejection, but from realizing love meant less to him than reputation ever would. My name is Fidelia Marchant, and the night he disowned me for carrying our driver's child was the night I stopped belonging to him and started belonging to myself. The storm came the same minute my father's voice turned into thunder. The house had never felt smaller, the walls echoing with the kind of rage that makes you realize love was never part of the design. "You're carrying his child?" His voice tore through the hall, cutting through the marble air. I could taste the bitterness before I answered. "I'm carrying my child." His eyes, cold, perfect, expensive, met mine like I was a business loss he needed to write off. "Our family doesn't breed scandal." I said it before I could stop myself. "Then maybe it's not a family." He didn't yell again. He didn't have to. He just walked over, pulled the ring off my finger, and turned away. My mother stood behind him, silent, her hands trembling near her pearls. Fear had made her smaller than the storm outside. When he called for security, it sounded like a transaction. "Get her off the property, tonight." The guards didn't look at me as they opened the door. The air outside was colder than I imagined. My coat clung to my skin, the rain stabbing through it. My suitcase fell open on the steps, papers dissolving under the water. Behind me, the lights inside the mansion flickered once and died. The sound of the gate locking was sharper than thunder. I could almost feel the lock turning inside my chest, too. My phone buzzed. His name. For 1 second. I thought maybe he'd changed his mind. "The card's been cut. Don't embarrass us again." Then, nothing but the storm. I walked, barefoot after a mile. The highway was a blur of headlights and horn blasts, the smell of wet asphalt filling my lungs. A truck roared past and splashed mud across my dress. Ahead, a single red sign glowed, an old gas station, flickering like a heartbeat refusing to quit. In my pocket, I still had Ethan's ring. I closed my hand around it, shaking not from the cold, but from something sharper. Clarity. If love had cost me everything, then fear would never own me again. I left Texas that night, carrying more than a child. I carried a vow. I would never let shame raise her the way power raised me. The motel's neon sign buzzed like a dying heartbeat, flashing vacancy across my reflection. The air smelled of damp and dust. I sat on the edge of the bed, pressed my hand to my stomach, and whispered, "It's you and me now, little one." The light outside flickered twice, like an answer. The next morning, I fainted in line at a bakery called Callahan's. When I woke, a woman with silver hair and flour on her hands was leaning over me. "Easy now, sweetheart. You're not done yet." Ruth Callahan took me to the small house behind her shop, fed me oatmeal, and said quietly, "People with money think shame is currency. Don't buy it." A week later, she handed me a weathered notebook. "Write everything down. Pain, plans, pennies. Don't let it vanish." That night, I wrote my first entry. Milk, $2. Bread, $1. Hope, unpriced. Before she passed, Ruth gave me a torn Bible page with a line written in ink. "No pain is wasted if you learn to use it." I taped it beside my baby's ultrasound. Only after she was gone did I find her dismissal letter, signed by my father. Ruth had been the nurse he ruined. The man who destroyed her life had forced her to save mine. Holding Alara on Ruth's porch, I read the words again and whispered, "Then I'll make it worth something." Years later, I worked in a small garage on the edge of town. Grease under my nails, hair tied back. Every night I wrote in the log. 6 cars fixed, 4 lessons learned. One customer watched me work, Bill Porter, a retired Air Force sergeant. "You work like a soldier, merchant." "I work like a mother." "Same thing if you do it right." He handed me a card. Air Force Mechanical Reserve Program. I hesitated, then remembered Ruth's words. Work that feeds the world is sacred. At the interview, the officer asked, "Any family ties to the defense industry?" "Yes," I said, "to everything wrong with it." He signed my acceptance letter. Before I left, Alara hugged me. "Will you be stronger when you come back?" "Stronger than the storm," I told her, and meant every word. The first morning at Tinker Air Force Base felt like stepping into someone else's skin. The uniform hung loose on my shoulders. The boots bit into my feet, and sweat crawled down my spine before sunrise. A young recruit snickered. "What's a princess doing here?" "Learning to build engines that don't quit." A few laughed, but Sergeant Bill Porter, hard-eyed, calm, just nodded. Sunlight flashing off his metal and briefly lighting my face. By noon, my palms burned raw from climbing ropes. When I slipped and hit the ground, blood soaked through my knee. A hand reached down. I shook my head and stood. If I fall, I'll use it as leverage. That night, I opened the log and wrote, Day 1. Fell twice, stood 3 times. The words steadied me like prayer. 6 weeks later, a lieutenant barked during inspection. "You can't lead if you're not loud." "Then I'll lead by showing up," I said. The room went silent. When the test scores came out, my name topped the list. Porter smiled as he handed me the recommendation letter for the officer engineering program. "You stood 1 more time than you fell." That night, a call came from home. Alara was in the hospital with a fever. My hands trembled as I reached for my keys, until Porter said quietly, "If you quit now, she'll learn quitting is an option." I pressed the phone to my ear and told the nurse, "Tell her mommy's fixing the biggest engine there is, our life." When graduation came, the flag rippled under the setting sun as Porter handed me the unit banner. For the first time, I stood taller than my fear. That night, I wrote in the log. Pain doesn't leave, it transforms. 3 years later, my boots fit. My voice carried weight. They called me Lieutenant Commander Marchant, the chief engineer who never raised her tone. A recruit once asked, "Ma'am, how do you stay calm under pressure?" "By remembering pressure builds engines." Not long after, I stood in Washington, D.C., the national flag bright over my head, accepting a medal for saving a malfunctioning aircraft. I whispered into the silence, "Ruth, I kept your promise." That same afternoon, an unmarked envelope slid across my desk. Inside was the logo I thought I'd buried, Marchant Energy Holdings, an invitation for a Department of Defense collaboration. I laughed once, without humor. The name never dies, does it? That night, Alara sat on the floor, cutting up old newspapers for a school project. One headline caught my eye. Marchant Energy faces environmental allegations. "Is that our family?" she asked. "Just our name," I said. "Not our values." In the hangar the next day, I watched a young technician tighten a loose bolt the wrong way. "Do it again," I told him. "Engines forgive no mistakes." He looked up. "Do people?" "Sometimes," I said. "When they learn the price." Later, Bill Porter called from headquarters. "Marchant, heads up! Your family's name is back in the papers." I looked at the medal beside the log. It was never out. As I turned off the lights in my office, the glow caught the edge of the Marchant Energy letter and my glass award, 1 for money, 1 for honor. 18 years ago, I whispered. He built an empire out of oil. I built one out of integrity. Let's see which burns longer. Washington woke under a sheet of mist that morning. The air bit through my gloves as I stepped from the military car and looked up at the glass tower of Marchant Energy, the empire that had once been forbidden ground. The revolving doors caught my reflection. Commander Marchant. For the first time, the name didn't sting. The sunlight off the company logo glinted across my metal. 2 worlds of Marchant colliding in one breath. On the 42nd floor, the city sprawled below the conference room's glass walls. "Next on the agenda," the secretary announced, "Lieutenant Commander Fidelia R. Marchant, Department of Defense Liaison." Every head turned. At the far end of the table sat my father, hair gray now, hands trembling slightly. I spoke before he could. This review is procedural, not personal. No one dared breathe. The man who had thrown me out now had to stand while I addressed the board. I laid out the evidence. Emission leaks, falsified reports, safety violations. The chief engineer tried to interrupt. "Commander, that's classified information." "Only if you're hiding something." My father's jaw tightened. "We can handle this internally." "That's what you said 18 years ago, isn't it?" Silence, sharp as a blade. Afterward, he cleared the room. "Fidelia, I didn't think you'd survive. You look different. I look free." He tried again, softer. "You can still help this family. Family doesn't require legal counsel." I left a folder on the table labeled Accountability Under Review and walked away. In the elevator mirror, I saw him standing alone, shrunken inside his own glass kingdom. My fingers brushed the insignia on my uniform. I wasn't just confronting my father. I was standing for everyone he'd broken, including Ruth. That night, I opened the log and wrote. The table turned. I didn't need to flip it. The knock came after midnight. When I opened the door, the hallway was empty except for a brown envelope and a flash drive. On the front, "From someone who owed you the truth." Inside the video file, the year stamp read 2005. I pressed play. A shaky recording showed a line of sick workers lying on stretchers in a Marchant energy plant. Ruth Callahan's voice filled the speakers. "They'll die. Mr. Marchant. Please, report it." My father's reply, "We don't report mistakes. We bury them." I stopped breathing. The same woman who'd saved my life had once begged him to save others, and he'd silenced her. The moral debt had come full circle. In the envelope lay another page, handwritten in neat, familiar strokes. "Ethan Doyle. I never left you. Fee. Your father paid me off to disappear. I joined the Air Force because you once said engines make more sense than people. If you ever need me, I'm still in service." The next morning, I found him at Elgin Base. Time had carved lines in his face. "I thought I was protecting you," he said. "You were protecting his illusion," I answered. "I was protecting the truth." He handed me technical reports proving Marchant Energy was still falsifying data. "You'll have to testify. Then I'll speak." That night, I wrote in the log, 18 years of silence, time to make noise. I uploaded every file to the Department of Defense database with one note, full transparency requested. By dawn, headlines screamed Marchant Energy under federal investigation. Ilara looked up from the paper. "Mom, that's Grandpa's company." "It was," I said. "Now it's a crime scene." "Are you scared?" "Every day, but fear doesn't get a vote anymore." Later, a courier arrived with an official summons. "Commander Marchant, your testimony is requested before the federal committee." I signed, glanced out at the falling snow, and whispered, "Full circle, Ruth, full circle." The marble halls of the U.S. Capitol gleamed beneath white winter light. Cameras lined the corridor, lenses focused on the sign that read, Federal Defense Committee, Energy Integrity Hearing. My boots clicked against the red carpet as I stepped forward. Uniform pressed, metals glinting beneath the chandeliers. Every seat rose when I reached the witness stand. In the front row sat my father, Robert Marchant, hands shaking against his cane, surrounded by lawyers who spoke for him, because truth never could. "Commander Marchant," the chairman said, "you're related to Mr. Robert Marchant?" "By blood," I answered, "not by ethics." The air froze. I presented the data, the emission charts, the buried safety reports, and finally, the video of Ruth Callahan pleading for the dying workers. "I was raised to believe reputation was righteousness," I said, voice steady. "But silence is the most dangerous fuel. Integrity isn't inherited, it's built." The words cut through the room. My father tried to stand, his lawyer shouting, "Commander, is this revenge?" "No, sir," I said. "This is repair." He faltered, reaching for the table, then collapsed. I caught his arm before he hit the floor. "Sit. Dad," I whispered. "This is your turn to listen." The verdict came moments later. A full federal investigation into Marchant Energy. The cameras turned to me, expecting triumph, but I only stood straighter. Outside, snow drifted through the Washington air. I looked up at the gray sky. 18 years ago, he threw me out into a storm. I thought. Today, I walked through one of my own and didn't drown. 2 months later, spring sunlight stretched across the quiet cul-de-sac near the base. My house was small but deliberate, every brick chosen, every corner earned. When the iron gate opened with its low mechanical hum, the sound mirrored another night long ago, the night it had slammed shut behind me. This time, though, my hand was on the control. A silver SUV rolled to a stop. 3 figures stepped out. My father, my mother, and my brother Jonas. No gifts, no excuses, just silence and the hum of an idling engine. Albert, my longtime house manager, greeted them with military precision. "Welcome to Commander Marchant's residence." My father looked around, eyes dimmed by age. "Your house suits you better than mine ever did," he said softly. The word commander left his lips like something he finally believed. Inside, sunlight poured through the living room windows. Medals hung on one wall. Photos of Alara's graduation lined another. On the mantel sat the log, worn and full. My father reached for it, flipping to the last page. His lips moved as he read aloud. "Forgiveness under review. Outcome, mercy." He looked up, confused. "You keep score on your soul?" I smiled faintly. "No, I keep records of growth." Something inside him cracked, not loudly, but finally. He set the book down like it was sacred. In the kitchen, Alara was already setting the table. "I made her recipe," she said, nodding toward the photo of Ruth taped to the fridge. Steam rose from the pot. The smell of rosemary and bread filled the air. We sat, 3 generations bound by blood, mistakes, and the fragile attempt to start again. The silence wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't cruel either. My father's hand trembled as he reached for his glass. "I thought I was protecting our name," he said. "Turns out I was protecting my ego." I met his gaze. "You didn't ruin me, Dad. You trained me." He exhaled, shoulders lowering, as if the confession had been waiting 18 years to breathe. No one spoke after that. We didn't need to. My forgiveness wasn't in words. It was in the simple act of letting him sit at my table, eat my food, and see what resilience looked like up close. My mother poured the wine, her hands unsteady. Alara lifted her lemonade instead. "To Ruth Callahan, for saving both of you." My father bowed his head, voice quiet. "To Ruth, and to engines that don't quit." The toast hung in the air like sunlight through glass, fragile, final, and whole. That night, after the dishes were cleared and the house fell still, I opened the log once more. Reconciliation in progress. Balance. Steady. I closed the book gently and turned off the light, knowing that some debts aren't paid, they're rewritten. A year later, Christmas came with the smell of cinnamon and fresh pine instead of silence. For the first time in my life, 3 generations of Marchants sat under the same roof without armor. Alara hung the last ornament on the tree. My mother hummed quietly as she set the table. And my father, thinner now, slower, sat in the armchair, reading as if peace had always lived here. After dinner, Alara brought him a wrapped frame tied with silver ribbon. "For you, Grandpa." Inside were 3 photos side by side. Me at 19, soaked and defiant in a storm. Me in uniform, steady and strong, and me with Alara, both of us standing beneath the American flag. Below the pictures, the words read, "Legacy is not money, it's repair." He stared for a long time before the tears came. Quiet, human, real. For the first time, I saw my father not as the man who had disowned me, but as one who was finally learning how to love. The empire he'd built out of oil and pride had crumbled long ago. The one rebuilt here, in this small house filled with warmth and laughter, would last longer. When the plates were cleared and the laughter faded into soft music, I walked my parents to the door. Outside, the first flakes of snow drifted down. The porch light glowed across the driveway, golden, calm, forgiving. My father turned back, voice rough. "You've built something better than I ever could." "Then let's not ruin it with guilt," I said gently. "Go home, Dad." He hesitated, then reached for me. The hug was brief, trembling, 20 years overdue. When they drove away, the gate opened wide, and the headlights disappeared into the snow. Inside, the house was still. Ilara had fallen asleep at the table, her cheek resting beside the log. The last page open. My eyes caught the final line I'd written days before. Love. Active. Mercy. Sustained. I turned off every light but one, the soft glow above the porch, spilling over the driveway, where I'd once stood alone in the rain. 18 years ago, I was cast out into darkness. Now I leave the light on, for anyone still finding their way home. The storm never won. I became the calm, 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 became the calm.